Hello, my name is Dylan Holyfield, and welcome to my Macroeconomics term paper video, where I will be talking about the purpose of the U.S. Federal Reserve. By the end of this video, you will know what the Federal Reserve is, the history, its responsibilities, and where it's headed. What is the U.S. Federal Reserve? It's simply the central bank of the United States. Founded on December 23, 1913 by Congress while Woodrow Wilson was president, the purpose of the Fed was to have a more safer and more flexible financial system. The responsibilities of the U.S. Federal Reserve are to conduct the nation's monetary policy by influencing money and credit conditions in the economy, in pursuit of full employment and stable prices, overseeing the banks to ensure the safety of the nation's financial system, and to protect the rights of customers. The Fed has a long line of history. Before the Fed was even founded, the people had their money in the local banks, just like usual. And there was one problem though. When the economy crashed, so did the banks, and the people lost all their money. All their money just went down the drain. So then the people started to not put their money in the banks, even if there was no threat of the banks crashing. The banks needed reserves to prevent the people from panicking, so they wouldn't go out of business. In 1913, they wrote the Federal Reserve Act, which solved this problem. They also needed to make financial transactions easier to conduct between business and the people. The purpose of the Fed was they just wanted to make the banking system better than it was and provide easier transactions between the people to make banking easier. They needed to strengthen the United States in the world economy, so they built a stable central bank so that foreign individuals, businesses, and governments would be comfortable doing business with a stable bank as an economic system. History of the Federal Reserve. The central bank had many responsibilities. They determined the money supply, supervising banks, lending to the banks during crises, and providing banking services for the government. Another big part of the central bank was they needed to rely on the local needs for money, which varied across the nation. The Federal Reserve System was a central bank under public control with checks and balances. By the 16th of November, 12 cities were chosen for the Federal Reserve banks were now open. World War I had just started in 1914, but thankfully they had the secure banks, and they were working normally thanks to the emergency currency. In 1920, the Virginia representative Carter Glass warned the nation that the stock market speculation would lead to the biggest crash yet. And they soon found out in 1929 that they were right. Over 10,000 banks crashed. After the Great Depression, Congress passed the Banking Act of 1933 for separating commercial investment banking and requiring government securities as collateral for Federal Reserve notes. This here is a Fed graph showing all other loans reporting member banks' Federal Reserve System for the United States. And as you can see, once you reach about 1930, it drops drastically, the billions of dollars. What does the Fed do? The Fed is tasked with controlling interest rates, money supply, as well as overseeing the banking system. The Fed is set up with 4 tiers starting with the Board of Governors, the Federal Open Market Committee, or the FOMC, and the 12 regional banks, and lastly, smaller member banks. The Board of Governors is made up of 7 people who are nominated by the President, who are responsible for the monetary policy. They sit in Washington to pass Senate approval and make decisions. The monetary policy is made to promote economic health for the country. The policy impacts interest rates, which go back to the economy. The discount rate is a part of monetary policy. This rate is the interest rate given to commercial banks as well as other depository institutions on loans they acquire from Federal Reserve Bank's lending section. Reserve requirements, which basically says how much the bank can hold in reserves as well as much as they can lend out. And the Board of Governors is run by Chairman Janet Yellen. The FOMC, the 7 Board of Governors, and 5 regional bank presidents that run the open market operations. The Federal Reserve has used OMOs, open market operations, the purchase of the government bonds on the open market, to alter federal funds rate. When they reduce the federal funds rate, it encourages banks to take out interbank loans. This action takes away them to lend more freely. In theory, speeds up the economy. Other responsibilities of the Fed. The Fed manages inflation by controlling credit, the largest component in the money supply. Fed controls interest rates. They can raise the rates, making credit more expensive. This lowers the money supply, which curbs inflation. When there is no risk of inflation, rates are lowered to make credit cheap. Liquidity increases, which leads to business growth and ultimately brings down unemployment. The Fed uses the Consumer Price Index, CPI, to monitor inflation through the core inflation rate. This is a chart offered by Fred, which is the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, for all urban consumers, all items less food and energy. So this pretty much shows the Consumer Price Index for all the urban consumers, and you can see it goes from about just touch after 1950 all the way up to current times, and it just keeps on raising at a steady pace. It started off kind of slow, and then it's been really going up. The future of the Fed. Short-term interest rates have been near zero for about 6 years. Janet Yellen is wanting to raise them for some reason, although a higher interest rate might engage turmoil in stock and bonds market as investors adjust to higher credit. So, Federal Reserve will be continuing to manage interest rates and banks all over the nation. The Fed helps the nation in many ways. For the most part, it helps the nation recover from recession or keep the economy going strong. By controlling the interest rates and keeping them low until wage growth is in line with the Federal Reserve's overall inflation targets and the labor market is back to normal again. Thank you for taking time to watch my term paper video.